Greetings everyone, I am LegenGary. Pop quiz, what's the opposite of up? Down, what's the opposite of red? Blue, what's the opposite of legs?
ARMS is an interesting Nintendo game to say the very least. This game was released back in the grand year of 2017, 4 months after the launch of the Nintendo Switch, and to say the hype train was moving for this game was to say the very least. Back then, if you were a Nintendo fan, it was very common to see fan art, news posts, small lore drops, and more about the game all over social media. People still had a few doubts about whether the game would live up to all the excitement, but for the most part, people had a positive outlook for Nintendo's new fighting game. And then the game came out, and people for the most part were whelmed. Reviews all kinda said the same thing. The game wasn't bad, however it was lacking in the content department, and the combat, while fun for a while, felt like it lacked depth. What had been one of Nintendo's best-selling new IPs quickly became one of the quickest drop games on the Switch, with many no longer thinking it was worth their time.
But is that true nowadays? 3 years, a bunch of updates, and 5 characters later, is ARMS still worth playing? Well, that's the question that I decided to look into because my curiosity just wouldn't let it go. So I decided to boot it up on my Switch, played for about 5 hours or so, and in short, I think the game's fun. In long,
let's start talking about the things I like about the game. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the game's style and overall aesthetic. The menu definitely has a sporty and clean look to it, with the clean animations and that bold black font on top of that sharp yellow background. This isn't a big deal in terms of the game's overall quality, but when I personally see a menu like this where you can tell there was effort put in to give the game its own unique flair menu-wise, I can't help but appreciate it. Outside of clean menus, we have the art style of the characters. The devs have said in an interview that the designs of the characters were inspired by the art of Dragon Ball and Akira. An interesting combination on paper, that's for sure. But then when you see that translate over to the character design in game, whew, yeah, this looks really good. You got a bit of variety here in terms of character types, from sporty boxers and martial artists to mech suits and to whatever the heck Helix is supposed to be. And as the name of the game says, they all have long, stretchy arms that further incorporates their specific character's theme. For example, Springman essentially has slinkies for arms, while Midman has arms made out of ramen noodles. The whole thing looks cool, while at the same time having that touch of Nintendo quirkiness that we have come to expect from them. Outside of the art style, we have the music of ARMS, which is honestly just as unique. Now, I'm no musical expert or anything, but when I listen to ARMS music, I can't help but get a little hype for some stretchy arm battles. It has this energy to it that makes each fight that accompanies the tracks feel big and epic, which probably has something to do with the vocal tracks that go along with the music. I'm pretty sure they don't say anything other than whoa and na 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 na, but it's the very ways they sing that makes it so pleasant to listen to. And it's that simple vocals that add just a flavor to this music that I personally haven't heard from any other Nintendo game. Now where the real fun begins for me personally is the gameplay. This being a fighting game, the gameplay is focused around the flow of combat. In ARMS, that flow is based around a sort of rock, paper, scissors like balance to the offensive and defensive abilities. It breaks down like this. You have punch, grab, and shield. These are the bread and butter to the whole combat flow, and each one can be used to counter one another. Punch beats grab, shield beats punch, and grab beats shield. As the match goes on, you and the opponent go at each other trading blows, always keeping in mind the flow of combat in the back of your head. Always looking for ways to counter and begin a chain of attacks. But that's not all you have at your disposal. On top of that combat flow, you also have the movement options and your rush attack. Each character can move freely on the ground via strafe walking and dashing, while also being able to jump and use mid-air dodges. And then we get the rush attack, which is gained by fighting the match as you normally would. Its charge up is pretty much this game's version of charging a super meter. Once the rush gauge is filled, you can do a rush attack, where you start throwing a flurry of punches towards your opponent for massive damage. Now, rush isn't really figured into the rock, paper, scissors flow of combat, rather it acts like a wildcard move. Both being able to beat all these moves while at the same time having the ability to be countered by everything if timed right. All this basic combat flow design keeps things nice and easy to learn for casual fighting game fans such as myself, but also allows for the flow to translate well to the motion controls of the Joy-Cons. That's not to say the whole game is purely a motion control fest. The game supports multiple controller types, including both Joy-Con grip and Pro Controller options, which is my preferred way to play. Yeah, I know, heresy.
Now this is enough to get you started into the game. But in order to win any matches, just like any other fighting game, you're gonna have to learn to do more than just move and punch.
That's where learning the characters and arms come into play. Each of the 15 characters have unique ways of interacting with offensive, defensive, and movement-based options of the game. Some have a built-in counter moves that can be unleashed via dodging or shielding. Some have aerial options such as Ribbon Girl's double jump or Twin Tails float or aerial shield. And then some of them just change up the flow of battle completely, as their special abilities can act as new defensive or offensive measures. A great example of this can be found in one of my personal favorite characters of the game, Masango. His abilities are all about utilizing his little spirit mask friend Masanga. By blocking incoming attacks, Masango can send out Masanga to become an energy pillar. If Masango goes through the pillar, he can equip Masanga as a mask that changes his entire weight, speed, and defense class. This all depends on the color of Masanga. Throughout the fight, the mask will alternate between red, blue, and yellow. Equip the right one and you can give yourself less stagger chance, quicker movement speed, or better defense against rush attacks. These effects on your character last as long as you don't get knocked down, or until you go to shield again. So there is a balance to figuring out when is the best time to use a certain mask ability, and when to simply wait for the next color change. But that's not all this character can do. You see, when you send out the energy pillar, it also acts as a second shield in whichever direction you are facing when shielding. So for a brief second, you can have a second shield to block incoming attacks. And on top of that, the Masanga shield is one of the few defensive options in the game that can stop grabs, which makes it even more useful as an ability to have at your disposal. Each character in this game has that level of depth to them that you can only really appreciate by playing around and learning each individual character, which when you think about it is very much the tried and true appeal of fighting games as a genre. Learning the game, understanding the characters, creating on-the-fly strategies, it's part of the formula that makes a fighting game fun to play.
But hold on to your hats, ladies and gents, because I haven't even addressed the 42 equipable arms yet.
Arms is really where the playstyle all comes together. You learned what the basics of combat are, you've learned what your character can do ability-wise, and now you have to choose how you're going to best use all that info to best combo with your arm selection. Before each game, you are given a chance to set 3 types of arms that you would like to select for a pre-match loadout. You can then select these 3 arms you want to equip to each side of the character. Picking the right type of arm and then matching them to your playstyle is very important, since each arm has a different attack style and other unique aspects to them. The arms are defined by a few varying factors: weight class, extension and retraction speed, and attribute or elemental type. Weight is typically used to determine the knockdown potential for a single attack. The speed of the arm, both in the extension and retraction, gives you an understanding of how quickly an attack will be unleashed upon button press, while also giving you the idea of how soon it will take to return to the character when called back. These 2 variables are often interchanged, with the common rule being the heavier the arm, the longer it will take to attack and cancel. However, if you want to get the exact detail of the speed of each of your arms, you'll have to look online for those specific numbers. The attribute of an arm can often cause specific status effects to the opponent when hit with a charged attack. Charging an attack is as simple as air dodging or holding down shield. The types of effects that can be dealt to your opponent are all based around one of 9 different attributes that an arm can be linked to. For example, hit a guy with an ice theme arm and it will freeze him. Hit him with an electric arm, it'll stun him. Hit him with a firearm and it'll turn him into barbecue. Don't forget the sauce.
Now with all that info about the combat, it can be very easy to be overwhelmed. And that's where all the different modes come into play, so that you can best learn to get used to this lanky noodle fighter combat and gameplay.
There are a total of 8 different game modes under the Versus tab. You'll have your typical fighting 1v1 mode along with other unique modes. 2v2 is a team battle mode where you work with another partner to take down 2 other players within the match. This calls for you to stick together while also being on the lookout for who the members of the other team are focusing their attacks on. Then you have a multiplayer free-for-all mode called Headlock Scramble. In this mode, you and other players battle while an item called Headlock is placed into the arena. When active, this item allows the player to gain 2 additional sets of arms, making your attack and grabs more effective as they have more chances to land on the opponent. The item remains active until the player is knocked down or grabbed out of the state. Then you win the match by being the last man standing. There is also 3 non-combat modes. Skill Shot is a target practice-like mode focusing on training the aim of your punches. When faced with another player, you simply try to break more targets than them to gain a higher score to win the round. Hoops is a mode where you and another opponent try to throw each other into, well, a hoop. The main focus of this is training you on your grab abilities. And then you got V-Ball, which is just V-Ball. with the focus on training your ground to aerial punches. The last two modes are mainly single player focused. We got this 1 versus 100 where you go against 99 CPU enemies that can be taken down in one punch with a super boss stashed away at the end of the fight. And then we have Arms Test, a mode consisting of a random playlist of all the other modes in which your arms loadout is pre-selected and randomized at the beginning of each mode. Playing through all these, whether it's solo or online, really helped me to get into the flow of combat more, and I found myself enjoying the game way more than I expected myself to. Sure, I could have just played this game's arcade mode, training, and ranked matches all day, but playing through all these other modes really made me appreciate the simplicity of the combat, while also becoming more skilled at the game itself. It all plays into the idea of having fun while also learning the game, its characters, and its combat flow. And it's the entire package of content that really makes ARMS a fun game to me personally. However,
Oh boy, here comes the part where I talk about what I didn't like.
there's a few problems I personally do have with this game, but unlike most of the reviews that I've made, the problems aren't really what's in the game, but rather what's not in the game. I find myself echoing a lot of the same thoughts that other reviewers at the time of release said. Personally, I don't think the combat is as shallow as some people make it out to be. Yes, it's a simple combat system, you ain't gonna be draining a person's health bar with a 97 hit combo or anything like that, but there's still a bit of depth to the character choices, what you set up with your arms, when you choose to use certain attacks and abilities that does keep the game fun to play. Personally though, I still do think it's missing something. Something that fighting games including Nintendo's own Smash Bros. Has that ARMS doesn't have. And if it was added, I think it would make the game a lot more interesting. And that is character-specific supers. Sure, there's plenty of old school fighting games that don't use this, but usually those games are also filled to the brim with character-specific attacks, which ARMS kind of lacks, being that every character can use the same type of arms that another can. Adding supers to the mix allows for the characters to become more identifiable, on top of invoking a bit more hype into the match. And yeah, there is a rush move, but personally, I don't think it's a good replacement for this. When I or somebody else does a rush attack, I don't feel anything special. In fact, I feel more hype when I land a grab, because at least with that, it has some sort of unique character animation to it. And it's that unique animation and attacks that I personally would have loved to see more from this game. They put so much effort into making these characters stylized and cool looking with their themes and special moves that it just feels like a bit of a letdown that they don't have a unique super move to match that. The other thing I had a problem with was the way the game handled specific modes within the Grand Prix. Skill Shot, V-Ball, and Hoops are all modes that show up in it, and they are all treated like normal matches. You have to win each of these matches in order to progress in the Grand Prix, which is just a bit bizarre to me. Personally, I look at these modes and I immediately think of them as bonus modes, kind of like a break the target situation from Smash Bros. Or beat up the green Lexus in Street Fighter 2. These modes are mainly to test your skills in a particular area, and as such, they don't really give off the same feeling as a regular fight would. Treating them like matches makes sense within the casual online arenas, but treating them this way for your game's arcade mode is just weird. It'd be like if you couldn't complete classic mode in Smash if you didn't have a high enough score in home run contest or something like that. The problem isn't really all that bad, as the game does save your progress in the Grand Prix for you to try again later whenever you want, but it doesn't change the fact that I personally disagree with it. Again though, this is more of a personal gripe if anything.
Now you're probably thinking, he's cut away to live action again. He might be making a joke about Nintendo's online services. But honestly, those are just a big joke in themselves, so why would I even bother?
Rather, I am going to go ahead and get my main problem with the game out of the way. The lack of a single player story mode. And okay, I get it, not all video games need a story mode, and specifically in the fighting game scene, many people feel that it is unnecessary. But personally, I think that's a bunch of hogwash. Fighting games about a decade ago realized that having a single player story mode, even if it is essentially an overly dolled up arcade mode run, adds value to the game. And when you're going to sell a brand new fighting game IP at a price of $60, adding more value could never hurt. Especially when you have a game that's this stylish and unique. Having a story mode would work wonders for continuing the player's investment in the series. After all, it was the characters, setting, lore, and concept that got people to buy the game in the first place. You might as well do something with all that and make something that people can really sink their teeth into, really get them involved in the world. You reel the players in with that, and then you don't give them anything more than what they already know. It's basically the same situation that happened with Blizzard's Overwatch. But with that, at least they gave you cinematic story animations online to fill in the void. ARMS just sort of happened, and then they didn't go any further with the plot or world details or anything. And the fact that I'm saying this 3 years after launch honestly makes me a tad bit disappointed. There is in works a Dark Horse graphic novel series for ARMS that was supposed to come out in 2018. As of earlier this year, they've said the project is still happening, so hopefully it'll see the light of day. As for the game though, I don't think they're really going to add a story mode to it anytime soon.
Now, all these little issues that I have with this game could all just be rectified with a sequel, and honestly, I'd be more than down to play something like that. And I don't think I'm alone in that thought.
That has a lot of potential to be even better than what the game already is. Sure, the game as of now lacks single player content, but when it comes to the core gameplay experience, this game is anything but a slouch. I can't stress enough how fun the combat flow is. It's simple, but within that simplicity, there is so much fun to be had. And if we got a sequel that built more off of that core gameplay, adding new moves and some more unique flair to the fights, I think we could get a game that is both fun to play as well as fun to watch. By doing that, it would really help to boost the competitive scene for ARMS, and in turn continue the appeal and hype for the IP. Will any of this happen though? Well, that remains to be seen. As of the time of me recording this, Nintendo has just announced Min Min to be added to Smash Bros. Ultimate as part of the new Fighters Pass. And earlier this year, Nintendo put up on the eShop a free trial for the game where, for a limited time, you can play all the content. But other than that, there isn't really any sign of a new ARMS game in development at the moment.
So, is ARMS still worth playing in 2020? Well, yeah, personally I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of small little problems to it and everything like that, but the core gameplay is still very, very fun. And there is a small but active community still surrounding the game, so if you want to play online, there's plenty of people to do so. But would I recommend that you pay for this game at like a full price, like $60? Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think you'd be better off waiting for like $40 to $30 worth or something like that. You know, something a little more on the cheaper side. ARMS is a fun game, and hopefully one day soon Nintendo will go back to it and finally stretch this game to its full potential. And with that dad joke out of the way, I'll see you all later.
This is gonna be a match to remember.